Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Haunted America. On today's episode, we read a few Reddit ghost stories, one from a psychiatric nurse, and the other from a forensic nurse working in a lockup unit in a hospital. All this plus our thoughts and comments today on
Haunted America.
If you yourself would like to call in and leave us a voicemail to have your ghost story played out loud on the podcast, give us a call at 716-389-4662. 716-389-4662. Or you can do like you've been doing and leave us an email at hauntedamericapodcast@gmail.com. I'm a psychiatric nurse. Early in my career, I worked at a residential mental health facility. There was a resident I'll call Marion Duchesne. He was an elective mute, which simply means that he didn't, wouldn't, couldn't talk, but there were no pathological findings as to why. He had spoken earlier in his life, and in fact seemed quite normal back then, with the notable exception of being close to 7 feet tall. He'd been raised in the Deep South and joined the military when he was 19. After boot camp, he was stationed somewhere in the South. One night, he just vanished. It was declared an AWOL for years, and finally, he was declared missing and then dead. 10 years later, a 7-foot-tall man walked into a VA hospital emergency room in my part of the Midwest, and he said to the receptionist, "My name is Marion Duchesne, and I've been dead for 10 years. Those were the last words he ever spoke.
He was covered with dust and he was wearing the same clothes he'd been reported to be wearing the night he vanished. His social security number had not been used and he had no identification on his person. However, they were able to identify him, I guess via fingerprints. He was well fed and in good health, except for his refusal to speak. The family was notified, but they said they had already grieved their lost man and that whomever was claiming to be him simply could not be. They said he was a haint and stand-in for their dead relative and demanded not to be contacted again. Marion paced all day, every day, not in a frantic way, but just lumbering up and down the halls and outside. He smiled all the time and would be moving his mouth in a way that indicated talking or muttering, but he was dead silent. He had an unnerving habit of throwing his head back with his mouth wide open as if he were laughing heartily, but not even a breath could be heard. If told to go to the dining room for a meal, he'd go and eat, but if nobody told him, he just kept pacing, never indicating hunger. If offered a cigarette, he'd smoke it in an oddly formal way, almost delicately, if that makes sense. But he never seemed to crave smoking. The man wanted nothing. If I talked to him, he appeared to listen, periodically throwing his head back in that laughter-mimicking way of his. There was nothing to do for this man. Various medications were tried, but they did not affect him either positively or negatively. Occupational therapy did nothing because Marion would just grin, and unless told to stay put, he'd get up and start pacing again.
On my last day at the job, on my way to something better, the last thing I saw was Marion pacing in the parking lot, throwing his head back to laugh. Later I wondered if all along I'd been dealing with a ghost. All these years later, I still don't know. So, scrolling down, somebody seemed to have left an explanation as to what a haint is.
I was wondering that too. I've never heard of that term.
Which is what the family is claiming that this man is, because they think that their relative is passed on. So according to this user, a haint is an old southern word for a specific type of ghost or evil spirit from the Carolina coast, but found in tales from various regions of the South. they believe that Haints probably originated from the Gullah Geechee people. I'm guessing that's of Indian descent. Oh no, descendants of African slaves in the Carolina Lowcountry and the Barrier Islands. In South Carolina, Haints are malicious ghosts, often seeking to steal or harm naughty children. Huh.
That doesn't go along with the description of this guy, though.
But an evil spirit does.
I mean, I guess.
However, this guy doesn't seem to be too evil, just kind of weird.
Yeah.
Also, I find it hard to believe that this man is a spirit, is a ghost. Because if you're at a hospital, you have to check for heart rate, all that kind of stuff. You do normal checkups on your patients, right?
Which they definitely would have done as he came in saying who he was, regardless of him telling the truth about who he was. They would have done a workup on him, at least.
Exactly. So I find it almost impossible to think that this person would be a spirit.
They also offered him a cigarette, which means he physically took the cigarette, smoked it. They also gave him food, and he would eat the food. I think
it's a real person.
My personal opinion, the guy went AWOL. He saw some crazy stuff wherever he went for 10 years.
Living in the woods or something for 10 years and then just came out and decided he needed help.
So when he came back and he said, I've been dead for 10 years, I'm thinking that's like figuratively. Like, you guys think I've been dead, but I'm back. And that was the last thing he said. So, I mean, he wasn't going to give you any more than that.
All in all, good story. Let's get on to the next one.
I worked as a forensic nurse in a lockup unit in the hospital once with the state and county inmates. Had one older, demented lady who swore she was being haunted or abused by a demon she called Tiberius. So many crazy things happened whenever she was there. Like, we'd go into the room, do normal care, leave, and seconds later she'd start screaming bloody murder, and we'd run into the room and find her looking like she'd been in a fight with a boxing champ. Bloody lip, black eye, markings all over her body. No one ever saw her doing this stuff to herself. Things would get moved around the room by themselves. Like, at one point, she was in protective restraints because the doctor thought she was hurting herself. There was no way she could have moved or done anything to herself while in these restraints, but new marks would always appear on her tray or cart would be moved across the room. The room was secure, so there was no way someone else was doing this. You'd ask her questions and she'd just say it was Tiberius. After she was discharged, we always had trouble with that room. If there was going to be a rapid response or code, it happened in that room. One of the guards reporting that lights were going on and off in the room. It was that room.
So this story, just hearing that even after she was discharged, they still had trouble with that room. It makes me think that this Tiberius spirit, as she called him, or the spirit, is just an evil entity attached to this room for some reason or another. Obviously, it doesn't sound like the spirit was attached to her, because stuff happened after she was discharged.
Interesting choice for a name to just randomly come up with. If you were just randomly coming up with Tiberius,
some of the comments on this story, this one. Imagine yourself having protective restraints where there is no way you could move or do anything while seeing something sinister and terrifying approaching you. Very creepy to think about.
Yeah.
This one seems to kind of tell us a little bit more about the name Tiberius and spirits. This comment goes like this. Damn, that's kind of scary. I think Tiberius is often associated with traditional Christian demonology because he was the emperor of Rome when Christ was crucified. The theory is that he was possessed, hence the terrible things that happened during his rule and shortly thereafter. So that maybe gives us a little bit more of insight as to what Tiberius could be as far as in a spirit sense. just like I thought, a demon attached to this certain room for one reason or another.
Right. I would definitely say there's definitely something paranormal going on here. I mean, marks would just appear on her body. She's in total restraints. Her tray or cart would be moved across the room. And then even after she's gone, people are dying or coding in that room. And then the lights going on and off. That's always a clear sign of something like a stage of possession, like oppression or something going on.
100% a physical demon that likes to inflict pain upon the people that they're going after for one reason or another.
Yep.
I kind of like this story a little bit more. It makes me think a little bit more and want to do a little bit more research on this Tiberius spirit. Interesting.
It's a name that rings true. I know I've heard it before. There's this one comment on here. I had a hard time with it too, since my cat was named Tiberius, but Tiberius as in Captain James Kirk. That's what I thought of immediately. Was Captain Kirk.
It was hard for me to take this seriously because my nephew once told my sister that she should name her next baby Tiberius.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, let's not do that. Now that I know what the name Tiberius is, let's stay away from that name forever.
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us on today's episode of Haunted America. If you'd like to call in and leave us your ghost stories, give us a call at 716-389-4662 or email us at hauntedamericapodcast@gmail.com. We'll see you next time for another episode of
Haunted America.